ensure that participating youth learn about disability, advocacy, inclusion, accessibility, and the adapt sport of b-ball, a form of baseball that can be played by persons who are blind or visually impaired, using the ball that beeps and bases that buzz, helping to make baseball more inclusive. The sport uses audio cues and special equipment to alert and guide players to act. Camp Inclusion will allow the student advocates to delve into activities that give in-depth experiences about living with mobility and intellectual disabilities that will involve spending a portion of the day blindfolded in order to get a first-hand experience on how persons who are blind navigate their daily routines. This will include identifying objects, preparing simple meals, and navigating unfamiliar surroundings. An introduction to Braille segment has been scheduled. After learning basic sign language, students will spend a portion of the day communicating with non-verbal cues and sign language. The camp will culminate with the B-Ball Bonanza Tournament on Saturday, the 27th of July. Camp Inclusion 2024 is a collaborative effort of the Community Affairs Division, Disabilities Affairs Division, the National Commission with Persons with Disabilities, and the Bahamas Coalition of Advocates for Disability Awareness and Service. Mr. Deputy, as you are aware, the impacts of climate change are and will continue to be for some the greatest threats to humankind, resulting in an increased frequency and ferocity of disasters such as storm and hurricanes, in addition to its negative impact on property and lives resulting from droughts and heat waves. This is also a threat to our food security. The extent to which these increases will occur will depend on how well we are able to mitigate the amount of climate change that occurs. While small island developing states such as the Bahamas contribute very little, if any, to climate change, rising sea levels, increased frequency and intensity of hurricanes and storms, in addition to coral reef degradation, are all negatively impacting our way of life and economy. Climate adoption and mitigation, therefore, is crucial to addressing these threats, particularly in the Bahamas. And what better group of persons to begin with than our youth, who are our future? Camp Climate Action, the first of its kind under the auspices of my ministry, will take place from Tuesday the 6th to Friday the 16th of August. 100 students from the FGFLC after-school program and neighboring communities will participate. The goals of the camp are to increase awareness of climate change in vulnerable Bahamian youth, strengthen awareness about the value of and threats to coral reef and associated ecosystem, identify and implement effective strategies to combat climate change. The camp will culminate with a Climb Action exhibition on Saturday, the 17th of August. Camp Climate Action is a collaborative effort of the Community Affairs Division of my ministry, the Bahamas Environmental Education and Foundation Brief, the Bahamas Department of Meteorology, Department of Environmental Planning and Protection, the Ministry of Agriculture and Marine Technology, the Disaster Management Unit, DRM Authority, Climate Change Unit in the Office of the Prime Minister, and other climate-focused organizations. Mr. Deputy, I invite my parliamentary colleagues, residents of the Flamingo Gardens and neighboring communities, and the general public to be a part of our opening ceremony and relaunch of Camp Inclusion 2024 and Camp Climate Action on the Flamingo Gardens Park on Saturday, the 13th of July, 2024 at 12 noon. I also invite you to participate in the Beep Ball Bonanza Tournament on Saturday, the 27th of July, and the Climate Action Exhibition on Saturday, the 17th of August. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Order that the documents be brought up. Order that the documents do lie on the table. Further communications by ministers. Thank you, Honorable Member. Statements by the clerk. Message from the Governor General. Messages from the Senate. Motions for leave of absence, leave to resign, seat, and new writs. Presentations of petitions. Presentations of reports of committees. Adoption of reports of committees. First reading of bills. The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg leave to introduce, and I've read for the first time, a copy of the following. A bill for an act to improve the legislative framework with respect to the protection and registration of trademarks to give effect to certain international obligations of the Bahamas with respect to trademarks, to repeal the Trademarks Act 2015, and to provide for connected matters.
Order that the documents be brought up. Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that a bill for an act to improve, that the following bill, give me a pencil, please. It's been moved and seconded that the Trademarks Bill 2024. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Order that the bill be read a first time.
A bill for an act to improve the legislative framework with respect to the protection and registration of trademarks, to give effect to certain international obligations of the Bahamas with respect to trademarks, to repeal the Trademarks Act 2015, and to provide for connected matters.
For the first reading, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg leave to introduce, and I've read for the first time, a bill for an act to improve the legislative framework relating to grant and administration of patents, to repeal and replace the Patents Act 2015, and to provide for connected matters.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the Patients Bill 2024 be read a first time and tabled. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read a first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to improve the legislative framework relating to grant and administration of patents, to repeal and replace the Patents Act 2015, and to provide for connected matters.
For the first readings, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Finally, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg leave to introduce and have read for the first time a bill for an act to repeal and replace the Copyright Act and to modernize the law regarding copyright.
Is there a second now? A bill for an act to repeal. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read the first time and tabled. A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Copyright Act and to modernize the law regarding copyright. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. Order that the bill be read the first time and tabled.
A bill for an act to repeal and replace the Copyright Act and to modernize the law regarding copyright.
For the first reading of bills, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Freetown.
No further first reading.
Thank you, honorable member. Second reading and committal of bills.
Thank you.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Again, it's an honor and a privilege to stand in this place on behalf of the great people of the Pinewood constituency, whose support I will forever want to repay by my works. Mr. Deputy, I would also like to wish those members of my constituency a happy independence and remind them of our branch meeting that is scheduled for next week, Tuesday, at Cleveland
Honorable
Evenings.
member, which bill is this?
This is the Corporation Andia de Fomento 2024. I hope I said that right.
Thank you, honorable member.
Mr. Deputy, I wish to table for the approval of this honorable House the Corporation Andia de Fomento Bill 2024. Moving and second reading, Mr. Deputy, which is an instrument deemed necessary for the Bahamas to complete ascension to the Regional Development Institution, the Development Bank of Latin America, and the Caribbean, CAF, the English pronunciation. Mr. Deputy, in the remarks of the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, and the Minister of Finance during his budget debate, he mentioned that the Bahamas had endorsed an agreement to become a member of the CAF. And with your indulgence, permit me to provide a brief background of this institution. Mr. Deputy, CAF was established on February 7th, 1968, and is currently based in Caracas, Venezuela. Membership in this multilateral development bank comprises 21 shareholder countries and 13 private banks. While the majority of shareholders are Latin American countries, CAF is increasing its footprint in the Caribbean. Barbados, Jamaica, Trinidad and Tobago are presently shareholders in the institution, and the Bahamas, Dominica, and Grenada are in the process of completing requisite documents for ascension. Mr. Deputy, based on its 2023 annual report, CAF reported assets in excess of $53 million and a loan and investment portfolio of approximately $34 billion. The institution also witnessed a record in number of approval resources allocated for 308 projects, total $16,261 million, which represented an increase of some 15.3% over the amount approved in 2022. In addition, disbursement for projects in execution total $8,900 million. Mr. Deputy, CAP is rated as AA by S&P, AA- by Fitch, and AA3 by Moody, with a stable outlook across all agencies. Mr. Deputy, subsequent to consultation and guidance from CAF, the Bahamas undertook the position to join the institution as a Series C shareholder. In this membership category, access to CAF resources is subjected to 4 times the level of financial contribution by the Bahamas. In accordance with the Series C shareholder requirements, the Bahamas has agreed to subscribe to 3,521 shares at a cost of $49,998,200, payable over 2 budget periods. In line with the proposed level of contribution, access to CAF resources on an annual basis will total approximately $200 million. Mr. Deputy, following passage of the bill in both houses of Parliament, the Ministry of Finance would advance to CAF $25,006,200 as the first installment on the contribution. The balance on the contribution will be addressed in the 2025-2026 fiscal period. Mr. Deputy, I am told that the operations of CAF is analogous to the other regional multilateral development institutions, such as the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, and the Caribbean Development Bank, the CDB. I note that following dialogue with the CAF, the Ministry of Finance has identified that access to CAF resources can support the Bahamas' goals in the areas of climate change, infrastructure, the digital economy, crime and violence, and energy. It is envisioned that subsequent to the completion of the membership ascension process, staff from relevant government agencies will meet with staff from CAF to engage in more constructive dialogue on access and priority resource utilization initiatives. I wish also to note that during this dialogue to discuss development issues with the government, an invitation to meet with CAF staff will also be extended to members of the opposition and private sector establishments. Mr. Deputy, the Bahamas, as a small island state, is constantly seeking to advance its socio-economic agenda for growth and development of its citizens. In this regard, we have and continue to benefit from access to the technical and financial resources of our regional multilateral development partners, namely the Inter-American Development Bank and the Caribbean Development Bank. Mr. Deputy, as regional institutions, they have a unique understanding of our challenges and have delivered responsive tools, services, and instruments to move us further along the path to achieving our key development and growth objectives. Mr. Deputy, having considered the performance and operations of the CAF in the region, I am convinced that membership in CAF will reinforce this successful regional institutional achievement for the Bahamas and broaden the resources available to us for advancing our development agenda. Mr. Deputy, in conclusion, I wish merely to express gratitude to the senior management of CAF and the ministry and the staff at the Ministry of Finance, led by the Minister of Finance, the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador, the Attorney General's Office for their efforts in addressing over a short period of time salient issues deemed necessary to complete the membership process in CAF. The tabling and passage of the CAF bill in both houses of Parliament represents the final activity in the ascension process. Upon presentation of the CAF Act to the management of CAF, the Bahamas will officially become a member of the institutions with rights and privileges to participate in stakeholder meetings and to have access to its resources. Mr. Deputy, I thank you, and so moved.
Thank you, Honorable Member. Is there a seconder? The chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Freetown.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I rise to second, and I would refer to it as the CAF bill, Mr. Deputy. And this time I do have something to add, although very shortly, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I rise in this place because of the grace of God and because the persons of Freetown repose their confidence in me. Mr. Deputy Speaker, we live in an uncertain world, and there is always a degree of skepticism about things foreign. And so that persons may not be misled, I would rise, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Firstly, this is a very short bill. And what it's seeking to do, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is to approve the ascension and to domesticate this agreement. The matters of note, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is that Clause 5 gives the provisions of this agreement the force of law in this country. Clause 6 creates a power in the minister to make orders. Again, for the edification of the public, Mr. Deputy Speaker, any order made by a minister is subject to, if one wants to put it in this way, challenge and debate in this House by its process. So in reading that clause, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what must be read in it is once it is tabled and when it's on the way to gazetting, objection can be raised in this place and a debate for negative resolution can take place. And so that is the control on the power in Clause 6, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And the same applies, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to Clause 7, which permits for amendments to be done by order. And again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that would be subject to debate in this place if anybody takes an issue with it. But further for edification, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in this age of technology in which we live, I would invite anyone interested to check out, as the young people say, the CAF's website. It's at www.caf.com. It does take consideration, Mr. Deputy Speaker, because they tell you about themselves. And what I found interesting, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is some of the projects they have funded that will show their relevance to this country. Their mission statement is, at CAF, we are convinced that our work is a means to improve the quality of life for Latin Americans and Caribbeans. Their job, therefore, in development assistance and funding is their put, Mr. Deputy Speaker. In fact, they have made a contribution to the Caribbean islands affected by the passage of Hurricane Beryl already. As to who they are, they say, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for edification, we are a development bank committed to improving the quality of life for all Latin Americans and Caribbeans. Our actions promote sustainable development and regional integration. We aim to convert ourselves into the green and blue bank and the one responsible for the economic and social reactivation of the region. We offer advice and financial support to the public and private sectors of our shareholder countries. In addition, we generate knowledge to strengthen public policy in Latin America and the Caribbean to improve the quality of life and impact of the projects we promote. Then what do? We promote a sustainable development and model through credit, operation, non-refundable resources, and support in the technical and financial structure of projects in the public and private sectors in Latin America. Where we are made up of 19 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as Spain, Portugal, and 13 Latin American private banks. We have 13 offices to handle the projects we develop in the region. You will find, and the public will find on this website also, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the projects, the documents, anything that they need to know, the reports, they can find there. An example of some of the projects they support, Mr. Deputy Speaker, is in El Salvador. They had a program to support the health sector of El Salvador in the amount of $75 million. They had a program again in El Salvador to support programs for equipment and training. In Ecuador, they had a program to support biodiversity. In Panama, a national climate change policy support program. And in Argentina, a comprehensive sectorial approach project to support environmental action, Golden Isles, and to the tune of $75 million. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, in an age in which skepticism is rife and an age in which misinformation is rife, I would encourage all persons interested to know about this resource to look at the website, visit the website, www.caf.com. Find out for yourself. You needn't have anyone tell you about it. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I was told that debates, you used to have 15 minutes for debates, and that may be a useful thing because, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to speak about this bill in a relevant fashion, I've managed to do it in 5 minutes, and I see no need to provide any fillers, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And with that, Freetown, I'm not saying, Mr. Deputy Speaker, anything adverse about people who take longer, although I am in a roundabout way. But with that, Mr. Deputy Speaker, Freetown seconds this bill.
Thank you, Honorable Member. It has been moved and seconded that the following bill be read a second time and committed. A bill for an act to provide for the membership of the Bahamas as a shareholder country in the Corporación Andina de Fomento and for purposes connected thereto. As many, the chair recognizes the Honorable Member for Marco City.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. It is an honor, and I'm grateful to God for this opportunity to sit in the Parliament of the Bahamas to amplify the voice of our citizens in general, but Marco City in particular, and to say to the residents of Marco City how grateful I am for your confidence and your support over these 2 terms. And I will continue to discharge my duties. I, Mr. Deputy Speaker, absolutely enjoy the work of being in the community and addressing issues that confront our people, not only looking to change the physical environment, but to affect in a positive way the human condition. Today, we are debating the government's plan to ensure that we have additional sources of funding, in this case through the Development Bank of Latin America and the Caribbean, Corporación Andina de Fomento. This is the 2024 bill, which the members opposite were quick to indicate that collectively they may have talked about this joining or paying a subscription fee to this organization in less than 15 minutes or thereabout. And while that's their right, Mr. Deputy, they are asking, this government is asking the Bahamian people to commit $50 million in subscription fees to the organization, they are compelled to give compelling reasons why at this juncture, given the scarcity of funds we seem to have as a country, why they have made this particular choice. So in terms of the brevity of their speech, that's hardly relevant. What is relevant is, have you made the business case that $50 million at this time is the best use of the funds? Members on our side, we certainly agree that it is a useful thing to have multiple options on where our administration, where this country can go in order to borrow funds in order to ensure that the work of our country is done effectively. So we are not opposed to pursuing additional options. We do ask the government to pay greater respect to the Bahamian people in laying out why at this time $50 million subscription fee need to be paid to an additional organization, given the fact that we have two similar organizations that make funding for similar purposes available to the Bahamian people. And so, Mr. Deputy, after listening to the presentation this morning, we're not convinced that we've heard the compelling case or adequate explanation as to why this particular investment is necessary at this time. And so we would ask members, certainly in the wrap-up, to pay just a little bit more respect to the public in laying out the case. And so, but just before I get into the meat of the presentation, Mr. Deputy, we on this side had hoped that the government would have come today with at least a communication on the explosive discussions that are going on in the public domain with respect to the circulation of voice notes that have the potential to cause reputational damage both locally and internationally for an agency that is so important to our peace and security and the proper administration of laws in the Bahamas. At a minimum, we would have expected that the Prime Minister himself, since we know that in the Constitution, something at this level supersedes the Minister of National Security. We would have hoped that the Prime Minister himself would have made a communication, but in his absence, the acting Prime Minister would have made a communication. If only
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Point of order, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I know of no such constitutional provision. The only constitutional provision preserves for the Commissioner of Police autonomy. The public should be aware the Commissioner of Police is holding a meeting and briefing with the press from 11 a.m. was the indication. The other side has had two politicians judicially condemned for interfering with the police. They still don't seem to grasp that the police are supposed to be separate from politics. And so as the Commissioner of Police is moving to address the matter, I would invite them to read the first instance judgment and the Court of Appeal judgment, particularly the judgment of the current President, Justice John Isaacs, in the case of D. Shane Gibbs, the Commissioner of Police, and Regina and D. Shane Gibson. That is not the business of the political directorate.
Thank you, honourable member.
Mr. Deputy, as I was saying, we are taken back by the fact that the Prime Minister, in his absence, a member of his team, in this case, acting Prime Minister, would have, at a minimum, just simply allay concerns that members of the public have. That's the simple point. This is not to get into the granular details of matters that none of us, I presume, or certainly none on this side know the details of, but just to allay the fears of any Bahamian who believe that again, that we will suffer such reputational damage, that we can undermine institutions that are so important to to the development. Let me just finish the point so you could speak in a more fulsome way, please. And so, if only to say, here is the procedure of investigation that will be laid out. The Constitution, just to speak to what was mentioned by the minister, the member for Minister of National Security. In the Constitution, when you look at the Police Service Commission and its regulations outlined in 40 through 43, the procedure, again, does not outline a place with respect to the minister. That was the only reason why I made the point that clearly you could see what the process is in terms of investigations. And for that reason, I referenced the Prime Minister. That was the only reason. So again, if only a communication from the
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. The Leader of the Opposition does have a right to request information and statements and clarification. He has no right to tell us who ought to make those communications. Mr. Deputy, the Minister for National Security has made it clear that it's a matter for the police, and the police is making a statement. So he talks about not undermining institutions, and clearly, as a responsible leader of the opposition, I ask that he not undermine institutions and take the advice of the Minister for National Security, Casey, on this matter, and listen to the release by the police, as I'm sure will be forthcoming, and as the Minister said, is perhaps underway at the moment.
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Again, this is not a matter that we intended to, nor will we dwell on, only to say so that the member for Exuma, as well as the Minister of National Security, does not give the public the wrong impression. We believe that the members of the executive, much like the opposition, is concerned about reputational damage, and there is a way in their communication that they could allay the fears or concerns of Bahamians at all levels of the society in terms of what is being done. Included on that list of things that are being done is the statement being issued by the commissioner. And one of the reasons we did not get into the granular detail is because we too are awaiting the comments. The only question is, again, from the no doubt cabinet or subcommittee of cabinet would have had this discussion, and one would have expected to hear, particularly from an administration that spends a remarkable amount of money on PR and consultants, that they would have been advised on how we are able to again.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
I'll move on, Mr. Deputy, after this, I assure you. But clearly, the Leader of the Opposition, if well-intentioned, will take the advice of the Minister for National Security, listen to the press statements made by the Commissioner of Police, and thereafter, if he chooses to make more comments, do so. But for now, Madam Speaker, in this forum, it appears the only possible good that could come from what he is saying, Mr. Deputy, is his idea of potential political brownie points, and that's not what we're about. We're about governing. We want to respect institutions. We want to defend the reputation of our country, and I ask him as an honourable member to allow the process to take its course and leave it there.
Thank you, honourable member. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, just so that it can be very clear, the serious allegations, in order not to interfere with them, the process must be observed. The Court of Appeal set aside a conviction in a horrendous murder case because of something a politician said in this place. One sentence that he said in this place. And so as the member for Exumas and Ragged Island has said, everyone in here takes this seriously, no more than persons on this side. I would caution, having been the counsel who advanced those arguments, that it is very easy in seeking to perhaps be well-meaning to affect a process. And so, Mr. Deputy Speaker, as the matter is now extant, and we will certainly observe the caution that the pronouncements from the court would indicate that we ought to.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Just to say, in response to Exuma and Ragged Island, there could be no political brownie points for either side in matters that can have the potential to impact the reputation internally or externally. So that's the point. That is the point. So absolute, in my view, irresponsible to try and attribute that to our side. As I was saying, Mr. Deputy, with respect to the government's intention to pay $50 million to join this regional development bank, it is our view that we would support the expansion of opportunities to source funds to assist us in infrastructural development and other important projects within the country. We simply ask, in the context of this debate, what motivated the government at this time, given the financial choices we have to make as a country. And I'll just go through the argument very briefly to help the public understand the cautionary tale that we wish to share with respect to this fact. Mr. Deputy, the Bahamas has been for decades a shareholder and borrowing member of the Inter-American Development Bank, the IDB, as well as a shareholder and borrowing member of the Caribbean Development Bank, two agencies that does something similar to what what CAF is purported to do. And yes, I do understand the point made that one of the benefits of this particular development bank is that you are able to borrow 4 times the amount that, for lack of a better term, that you invest. But let me again remind the public, we have 2 regional organizations, the Inter-American Development Bank and the Caribbean Development Bank, both of which we are borrowing members. In its most recent reporting year, 2023, the IDB mobilized and financed some $13.5 billion with a B in total. I believe the amount just listed in terms of what CAF did last year, and colleagues may wish to correct me if I'm wrong, was a little bit less than that, certainly within our region. In 2023, the Caribbean Development Bank dispersed more than $380 million. Now, since joining these institutions, the public sector, and to a lesser extent, the private sector in the Bahamas, has benefited from hundreds of millions of dollars in loans, grants, and technical support from IDB and the Caribbean Development Bank. We continue to be a member of both of these institutions, and we maintain active portfolios for ongoing projects. Mr. Deputy, I make these points simply to state that if the argument from the other side is that we are making such a significant $50 million investment in yet another regional development bank in order to gain access to development financing, the truth is that we may absolutely not have that need at this moment or in the foreseeable future. If we do have that need in the foreseeable future, it would be useful for the government to then outline. That would have been, I think, an appropriate thing to put on the record. Here is why we are expanding the pool of funds that we have access to because of the following, and then lay out the case. But we did not hear from the member for Pinewood, nor did we hear from the Minister of National Security, the compelling case on what in the short or medium term projects that the government has on the radar. And we believe that that kind of argument would make sense and would resonate with Bahamian people, particularly since many of them do not have access to funds that are even due to them by this administration, but are not being paid because clearly there appears to be a challenge with funds being available for a wide range of things. So it is important to lay out the case as to why at this time, this year you'd spend $25 million, and next year you would spend $25 million. Indeed, given the massive public infrastructure deficit in the country, we must ask, why hasn't this administration turned more of these development institutions, turn to these development institutions to help finance bridges, dredging, land reclamation, roadworks, seawalls, public hospital, and airports, and so many more critical infrastructure. Given that it is the specific mandate of each of the institutions I just mentioned, Caribbean Development Bank and the IDB. Again, the case is being made today that we ought to go to CAF, we ought to become a member, pay $50 million, when we have, in the estimation of some members of our financial services community, we have underutilized the existing regional development organizations that we have access to, but now we are joining a third, which requires this year $25 million, and then, of course, next year another $25 million. It is not too much to ask of this administration to lay out the case. What are the specific things? One would have thought, for example, that the member for Central and South Eleuthera, for example, could have been one of the two speakers because at the end of the day, the infrastructural development falls within his portfolio, and we do know we would have liked to hear from the member for Central and South Eleuthera about the variety of projects that you are presently embarking on, that you may need funds for, given the fact that there is a deficit, that there's a deficit in terms of the amount of funds available to execute these projects. And so, given that it is the specific mandate of these institutions, again, why are they not more fully being utilized? It is their area of expertise, and we would be able to get hundreds of millions of dollars in affordable loans at concessionary interest terms and with extended repayment periods. Mr. Deputy, I can recall in the final months of our administration, we had commenced discussions with the Caribbean Development Bank to explore at least $100 million in loans for extensive road works throughout the Bahamas. And there were other infrastructural development projects that both the IDB and the Caribbean Development Bank were identified as real options to get these concessionary loans with extended repayment periods. This administration, as we said during the budget communication, has decided on a number of these matters to go in a different direction. And Mr. Deputy, here's what is interesting, and this is why, again, we hear the laughter and the scoffing at us raising a concern, why at this time for $50 million. But this administration, as we outlined in the budget, multiple speakers did, we made the point that the government has opted out of going to such development agencies like CAF and IDB and Caribbean Development Bank, and have in turn gone to a formula that we support. The formula is public-private partnership. The only problem is this administration, they don't engage to a large extent in public-private partnership because it doesn't, again, they haven't shown us the policy that they are following, and the policy we left in place, which we have to assume they are following. In fact, one of their members said on his feet that they are following the public-private partnership, but policy that we left in place. But clearly what they are doing is they are taking out loans that are off-the-book loans. These are not classical public-private partnerships that they are entering into. Today, if you take each of the cabinet ministers and put them in a separate room and ask them, what is the interest rate you are paying on various, because they have a number of them, various PPPs, they are unable to tell you what that interest rate is. And if they all know, then that means they're all culpable because they don't tell us, the Bahamian people. We've been asking, see, with IDB and the Caribbean Development Bank, we have a predictable interest rate as well as a repayment schedule. We believe that there are Bahamians who are able to provide interest rates and predictable repayment schedules that the Bahamian people would embrace, we would embrace. The only problem is this administration refused to tell us the terms of the arrangements that they are entering into. And the question is it that, that they are concerned about the spread? Is it that the 3% or 5% we may be able to get from some of these agencies, that they are in fact now paying naught of 8 or 9 or 10%? We don't know. And it is wrong for them to leave the public guessing, to leave rating agencies guessing, to leave potential creditors guessing on what arrangement they are entering into. And after all, it is not their personal money. It's the public's money. So in much the same way we are asking them today, what are the foreseeable projects that mandate this move at this time at the subscription fee of $50 million? We are also asking them to be transparent and accountable in all arrangements that they are entering into, because they are unwittingly, unintentionally putting even private funders who may mean well in terms of helping the government, since this government lacks the resources required to execute these projects, putting them in an untenable position in the long term by refusing to disclose the terms of the arrangement that they are entering into. And that's all we ask. It's nothing, this should be a non-controversial matter. And so, Mr. Deputy, again, we see it really as a kind of arrogance where you are able to take somebody else's resources, the Bahamian people's resources, spend it as you feel, and then you are offended when someone asks on behalf of the Bahamian people, what are the terms? You say you're helping us, and you just rely on the final product, but we're asking, at what price are you helping us? And what is the long-term implications? And just share the details. If you have a good thing going on, they love to boast about things that they believe are powerful and good things. Well, the terms of all of your arrangements on our behalf, you ought to lay out. And so we are very much concerned. And so I use the illustration of again, the role that regional organizations play, as well as the role of partners who have resources and who have no difficulty with disclosing the terms by which they make their resources available to the government. I use that illustration just to make the point that even where private sector groups seem not at all concerned about the public being aware of the arrangement that they have entered into with the government, this administration has refused to make available the details of their arrangement. And so, again, what is the impetus for us joining CAF at this time? What are the projects that necessitated this? As I mentioned, we are already members of reputable organizations where they can access funding. Mr. Deputy, here are a couple of theories as to what may be precipitating the action being taken by the government. And in fact, to be magnanimous with this administration, let's just ask the questions. We know that they have difficulties answering them, but we'll ask the questions. We hope, Mr. Deputy, that the government is being fully forthright that joining this institution is not tied to any promise or commitment already made to fund any specific government initiative. And so we ask them, have you joined at this time because maybe there are private partners that are involved in arrangements with the government who require additional funding, and that this is a way to facilitate those organizations approaching CAF in order to get additional funding for projects they intend to do that involve Bahamian assets. We also hope that the government does not find itself compelled to join this organization because the other multilateral entities and other private global leaders simply are not willing to lend money to the government to fund its project. The multilateral institutions, the credit rating agencies, and the global financial markets see the same things we see here in the Bahamas. They too see a government that does not have a credible fiscal and economic plan. They too see a government that has not been able to keep the economy from reverting back to the low growth, no growth trend line. They too see a government that has missed its deficit targets but refused to come clean with that realization until the ninth hour. After we pointed out that this administration continually misses deadlines, after we point out that this administration continually talk about being ahead in revenue collection, but behind on paying vendors, Mr. Deputy, this administration continues, in our estimation, through smoke and mirror to give the impression that all is well. Yet, as we look at the various arrangements they are exploring, it seemed to reek of desperation to access additional funds while not having given clear explanation for funds they already have at their disposal.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exum and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, we've urged the other side that whilst they have an obligation to oppose being the opposition, that we do not seek to talk down our economy and talk down our country. And to do so, Mr. Deputy, to do so, Mr. Deputy. Do I still have the floor, Mr. Deputy? Do I have the floor?
Members.
Mr. Deputy, do I have the floor? You've given me the floor.
Yeah. The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exum and Ragged Island.
To refer to this as desperation is not only talking down our economy and our country, but it is misleading, Mr. Deputy. The two previous speakers has laid out what we are doing. And for the member on the one hand to talk about how it's important for external agencies to see the Bahamas, and then talk about this being an act of desperation is completely misleading, Mr. Deputy, and irresponsible, I might add.
Thank you.
Mr. Deputy, this administration refuses to fully implement and abide by the procurement legislation. We see, as others see, a government that has loaned BPL $100 million without getting proper authorization from Parliament. They see a government that has caused a breach of the Central Bank Act by seizing the proceeds from the IMF special drawing rights, an undertaking that they had to fix retroactively in this Parliament. They had to come back here again to try and make good of a bad thing that they did, Mr. Deputy. In our view, this government may be finding an audience of persons willing to advance financing to them, because otherwise they may be finding that financing at preferential rates is shrinking in those traditional markets where they have gone to borrow before. And instead of mending their ways and practicing accountable, transparent governance, they have instead gone off to find another willing suitor. Mr. Deputy, they have to explain to the Bahamian people why, it is that $50 million of scarce resources at this time they are prepared to pay in subscription fees. It is not good enough what we heard from the two speakers before. They have not listed the things that necessitate this kind of decision. There may be plausible reasons that we could fully embrace, but they have declined to lay them out. Just before I take my seat, just for the few minutes that I have, I just wanted to, again, address something that is constantly said by the member for Exuma and Ragged Island. The chorus that is used by the member is always to paint members of the opposition, the three members of Parliament in Grand Bahama, and by extension, the rest of us. Each time we raise criticisms or critique of how the government is behaving, or statements that they make that are not backed up by action, or we are unclear on, his chorus is that we are talking down the economy, we are somehow not committed to celebrating Bahamian excellence. Nothing could be further from the truth. We will not be deterred in doing our job by critiquing what the government is doing or failing to do. They love the country no more than us. They have no greater commitment to making sure that we have a strong, robust reputation locally and internationally. But we will not be party to ill-advised decisions that they make, nor will we be silent in recommending different ways that they could approach a particular subject. Just recently, the comments were made again about the cruise versus stopover visitors, when our only goal was to point out that we celebrate every dollar that is earned in the Bahamas from cruise as well as stopover visitors. We believe that the potential for benefiting Bahamian people is great the more money is earned. So if records are being broken, we have no difficulty with that. But what we ask is that it is important for us to be careful not to count the record, Mr. Deputy, that does not translate in transforming Bahamians' lives. Because the goal of tourism, if you ask the veterans of tourism, the Vernice Walkings, the Vincent van der Poel, the Carey Fountains, the Sandy Sands, all of these persons, they will tell you that increased numbers coming into the Bahamas ought to translate into, one, creation of jobs, two, to generate foreign revenue in our country to improve our reserves, three, to ensure that the tourism dollar trickles down to all socioeconomic levels of our country, and that four, we increase Bahamian ownership, not just ownership, but in the various tourism enterprises, Bahamian leadership, and more than that, make sure that there are linkages between tourism and other productive sectors of our society. And so I wanted to make the point that, again, we value the influx, but let us be real. Let us tell the whole story, that many of the people who were coming here before as stopover visitors are now coming here as cruise passengers. Check the figures out of Florida. Check the fact that we have not grown in any substantial way in stopover visitors from Florida. However, we have grown in terms of cruise passengers. Why don't we tell the full story? That many of the persons who visit the Bahamas...
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Mr. Deputy, he's going down the same road again. The numbers are very clear. Overall, we're demonstrating an overall increase in stopover and a significant increase in cruise. Mr. Deputy, for the leader of the opposition to say that people who used to come by stopover now come by cruise, I mean, that's a phenomenal stretch. I wish he would give me their names, Mr. Deputy, since he is so certain and he says this so strongly. He can recognize that he is strong and he is wrong, Mr. Deputy, as he seeks to denigrate the great work of team tourism, as he seeks to speak against what the numbers show. The numbers don't lie, Mr. Deputy. The numbers are clear. And I invite the leader of the opposition to share with him the reports so that when he speaks strongly, he would be accurate, Mr. Deputy. I do want him to maintain whatever credibility he has left. And therefore, I want to share with him the numbers so that he can speak accurately and intelligently to the numbers. I believe he is the shadow minister for tourism. He can call me anytime. I can have him sit with the technical experts. We can go through the numbers so that when he speaks to these things, he can have a truer appreciation for the great work that this team of Bahamians are doing all around the world to bring foreign exchange, to bring revenues, to increase spending, and to increase stopover visitors as we increase cruise visitors, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Mr. Deputy, when we next come to this place, I'm going to lay out in a fulsome way the figures that have not yet been put on the record. I only say this. What we should tell the Bahamian people is that we are working on a strategic plan to increase stopover visitors, which provides the lion's share of our revenue. And with respect to cruise passengers, we should be transparent to say that many of the tourists who are coming here, they're going first to the enclaves that we have made available to them on their respective islands, and the bulk of the spending even then is going to many of those small islands, those small enclaves that we've made available to them. And we have to find a way as a government to ensure that more of the spend, even by cruise passengers, trickle throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And in fact, even when they come to Nassau, many times they have gone to their own island before arriving here in New Providence and spending a substantial amount of their resources. And so we don't talk down to it. We're just simply saying we now need to rethink how we are doing the business of tourism. And this is no reflection on the teams that are working diligently in tourism. This is a collective effort of government and opposition to reconfigure structurally how we are doing tourism in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And so again, Mr. Deputy, Marco City rests the case.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
So let me just conclude that when the member talks about telling the whole story, he gives an impression that someone is hiding something, Mr. Deputy. And therefore, that is completely misleading. And once more, Mr. Deputy, I invite the member to not give platitudes as if he is speaking something new whilst accusing someone of hiding something, Mr. Deputy. I invite him in the fullest transparency to sit with the team, get an explanation of the numbers, reflect on everything that this member has always said from day one, becoming Minister of Tourism, as it relates to the strategy. What he has said is absolutely nothing new, Mr. Deputy, but I take offense to him implying that someone is not telling the whole story.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstown.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. I didn't want to stop the member for Marco City as he was debating on CAF. Yeah. But, you know, he's very fluent, and I didn't want to break his fluency or his fluency. But yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. What I wanted to say, Mr. Deputy, the member spoke about projects in CAFs as though the government has already entered projects in CAFs. I think for the Bahamian people to understand and appreciate that the government has not signed on to the CAFs as yet. When it comes to projects, Mr. Deputy, discussions as it relates to potential projects in CAFs and CAF would be had at that particular time. So there are no projects specifically as we speak, but it wouldn't happen until after the government joins CAF. And I didn't want the member for Marco City to cause the people in the Bahamas to believe as though we have specific projects that are on stream or that we have specific projects that we are trying to target. Those targets or those projects will be discussed once becoming a member of CAF. Thank you. I just wanted to make that clear to the Bahamian people.
As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I did want to, before I get into my substantial presentation, to wish the constituents of East Grand Bahama, but also to wish all of the people of the Bahamas a happy independence. Independence is one of those holidays, one of those celebrations I think that we all can equally get behind. It is one of those holidays that reminds us about unity. It reminds us that there is far more that unites us than divides us. It reminds us about all of those good things about being Bahamian. And I also want to publicly commend and I know that members of the government did it yesterday, and also members of the opposition did it yesterday as well, but also to commend our men's national basketball team for the tremendous job, for the tremendous job, Mr. Deputy, that they have done. They have made all of us, they've made all of us proud. You know, I saw a post yesterday, Mr. Deputy, just before the game. I saw a post which, you know, said about Spain and the accomplishments that Spain had, and someone, and then they said right underneath it, you know, these are the kinds of stories that movies are made of. And that was one of those points in my mind that had the Bahamas won, I think the entire world would have heard the cry of the little small country. The entire world would have heard the cry and the congratulations of a small country. But, Mr. Deputy, we are so proud of them. They have done what no other Bahamian basketball team, I think, has ever done. And so we 100% congratulate them. They should walk with their heads held extremely high, not just high, but extremely high, because of all of the wonderful things that they have done. So we 100% congratulate all of them. Mr. Deputy, also, it is good once again to be able to speak in this place. It is a privilege to be able to speak in this place on behalf of the good and the special people of East Grand Bahama. Mr. Deputy, I support what the member for Marco City has said. A number of these points I will also reinforce and develop further, but he has done a tremendous job in terms of articulating the concerns that those of us on this side have had. The Bahamas government, Mr. Deputy, had signed an agreement to become a shareholder of this development bank in April of this year. I believe it was the Senator Halkidas who had said that CAF's commitment to improving quality of life strategically aligns with the government of Bahamas' goals to achieve the development objectives of the country through the application of key social and economic activities. And what we are doing here today was foreshadowed by the Prime Minister in his budget communication. But again, Mr. Deputy, as was stated by the member for Marco City, is that the cost of the subscription fee is $50 million over a period of 2 years. Well, the subscription cost, the cost to purchase the shares is $50 million.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Exuma and Ragged
The
Island.
member is a former minister of state for finance and an attorney, in fact. He knows full well that a fee is different from the cost of purchasing shares. And I would have great respect for him, Mr. Deputy, but I want him not to mislead the public that we're paying some fee to become a part of the organization, when at the same time he's saying we're purchasing shares. A fee is different from an investment every day of the week. It's not a synonym. It might be a synonym in show business, Mr. Speaker, but not in business, not in investments, and not in government. Let's be clear about it.
Time.
Mr. Deputy, Mr. Deputy, let me be more specific. Let me be more specific in terms of referring to the bill itself. The subscriber will pay the subscription price with immediately available funds. So if you want me to change the word fee, I'll change the word fee and I'll put inside here price, because that's what in essence that's what I said, which is it is a price that you are paying for shares.
Not in essence. Be specific.
Mr. Deputy,
Order, members.
it is a price that you are paying. Yeah, the same way how fee is different from tax in your view. But Mr. Deputy, as I said, the bottom line is we are paying $50 million. We are paying $50 million for the price of shares. This is again, a significant sum that the people of the Bahamas are being asked to pay. $50 million could be used in any number of different ways that would be required by the Bahamian public. Now, I accept that the CAF would broaden opportunities for access to development, finance, and guaranteed linked credit. But at the same time, the question to ask, Mr. Deputy, is always, what benefits are we getting, and are those benefits worth the $50 million? Let's also, Mr. Deputy, not oversell what we are doing here today.
Yes.
The government is starting a relationship with another bank to borrow additional, or to have access to be able to borrow additional funding, and will pay $50 million to do so. That is in essence what we are doing here today. And what the member for Marco City said, which I 100% agree with, is it is up to the government now to lay out the business case as to why it is the $50 million is necessary for us to do so. So we may agree with you, but you have to lay out for us why it is that you felt it was necessary to be able to spend $50 million, or spend 25 this year and 25 next year. And these are the things that you are getting as a result of your, what you call investment, as a result of your investment of the $50 million. Recently, CAF has begun a process of expanding its operations into the Caribbean. Recently, the president of CAF said, we are also reaching out to the rest of the Caribbean community, to bring them into our CAF family. Again, what that said to me was, and they could correct me if I'm wrong, but did we go out to seek them, or is this as a result of their expansion initiative into the rest of the Caribbean? He also said, Mr. Deputy, we plan to deepen our work there and expand across the region, complementing the work of the Caribbean Development Bank and the IDB. So, Mr. Deputy, another point which we hope the government has considered, or which we expect them also to have considered, is you are spending $50 million, not a significant amount, but you already have a very good working relationship with the Caribbean Development Bank and the IDB. And I'm sure that they would not mind having additional business. What I would ask is, what is special? What is different that we will be obtaining from CAF that one is worth the $50 million? Also, another question is, will the rates that we will be obtaining from CAF be different from, are they better, are they the same, are they worse than the Caribbean Development Bank and the IDB? Again, these are important, significant questions that if you are, right now, you have access to funding from the Caribbean Development Bank and you have access to funding from the IDB. We are now being asked to spend an additional $50 million. So lay out for us what we are getting from CAF, either that we are not going to be getting or not able to get from the Caribbean Development Bank or from the IDB, which makes paying that additional $50 million worth it. We are not saying it's not, but what we are saying is lay out for us what additional benefit we are going to get by paying this additional $50 million. Will the rates be less? And I accept what the member for Bain and Grantstown has said in terms of you may not have entered into official conversations with CAF because you are not yet a member, but I'm sure there is a contemplation as to what projects you could possibly use or what projects you could possibly envision if you do enter into a relationship with CAF. In fact, you would have entered or signed this agreement from April. So if you had signed this agreement from April, I'm sure that this agreement was not just sitting on the desk from April until now, but I'm sure that you would have in your contemplation what type projects you would like to put forward or you would like to be able to discuss with CAF. The IDB is also very large. You know, they had granted us the $500 million guarantee to the Bahamas government, amongst other loans. A very important question would be what could this bank also provide that the IDB could not? Right now, we have existing relationships with the IDB. So we're not paying any additional price for additional shares with the IDB. What are you getting in addition to what you could already get from the IDB? We need you to lay that out for us. Explain for us what is the additional benefits that you are getting that you already do not have access to. That's the point that the member for Marco City was making, and the point that we make is tell us what those additional benefits are that cause you to say, we have $50 million, we can spend this additional $50 million for it. What are those things that we are going to get that you do not have access to already through the IDB? The government also has also said a lot about their, they've also, as I said, not said, in fact, the member for Bain and Grantstown says that you have not entered into discussions with them as yet. And these banks, again, one thing I could say, they are very good at accessing your needs. And they are very good at providing you with their loan programs to assist with your needs. They are very good at doing that. Watch me. Watch me. But, Mr. Deputy, and providing, they are very good at being able to access or assess what your particular needs are. And they are very good at providing you with these proposals to meet your needs. Now, I would almost bet that they themselves, CAF, have their own ideas as to how they can assist the Bahamas, and I would be very surprised if they have not entered into conversations with or started talking to different ministers as to what would be available and what items they are able to speak about. So again, I ask, have different ministers been having discussions with CAF? And what are those areas that you've been having discussions with CAF on? I also understand that these loan agreements, they take years. Years to be able to complete and years to be able to implement and to finish. In fact, sometimes those loan agreements, they don't ever get finished because of the processes that have gone through. But we believe, Mr. Deputy, that the government should be able to say what are some of the areas that we are looking at or we would like to enter into discussions with the bank on. Transparency for the government in this case is very key because, again, $50 million is not a small amount that we are paying. So if you want to say to the public, well, there are a number of road projects that we would like to put to CAF, or there are some digital transformation projects, or there are some other infrastructure projects. There are bridges. If you want to say that these are some of the projects that you want to put forward to speak to CAF about, then fine. Are you having discussions with other non-governmental agencies, with other SOEs, in terms of funding or CAF funding projects with respect to these other SOEs? Are there discussions on airports, infrastructure development, the Family Islands? Are there discussions going on with respect to those? We believe that there ought to be discussions with CAF and other institutions on small business funding. We believe this is a critical need that the government ought to be speaking to institutions like CAF, institutions like the IDB and the World Bank and the Caribbean Development Bank on how we are able to advance small business funding and how we are able to advance the ease of doing business initiatives. You know, we need, Mr. Deputy, this government needs to become more business friendly. You know, they need to also have a more zeroed in focus on the ease of doing business and focus on dealing with matters that how businesses can, how they can do business more conveniently and how they can also assist. You know, in 2020, the World Bank did a release. And I want to quote from the World Bank's release in 2020, when it respects to business, to ease of doing business. And I quote, coming from the World Bank, with 4 reforms, the Bahamas implemented the most business facilitating measures. They were speaking about what was happening in the Caribbean. The country made the process of starting a business faster and less expensive by reducing registration times for business licenses and valued added tax, and by eliminating business registration fees. Authorities cut the time needed for an entrepreneur to complete all required formalities to start a business license in half to 11.5 days. The Bahamas also strengthened minority investors' rights by increasing conflict of interest disclosure requirements, clarifying ownership and control structures, and requiring greater corporate transparency. This was a report that came from, or a press release that came from the World Bank in 2020. We don't see these type of initiatives from this government. We also do not see whether they have maintained those type initiatives that were left in place by the Free National Movement. What we could see is some new initiatives, or what we ought to be seeing is some new initiatives on how we improve starting a business, on how we improve renewing business licenses, how we improve paying taxes, how we improve businesses getting additional financing. These are some of the things that the government ought to have been saying they are going to use their membership or this new membership in CAF. They ought to have been saying, look, we are going to put forward these particular programs, and this is how the Bahamian public should be able to benefit from it. Not just saying we're going to enter into this agreement, or we are going to pay this subscription price, and this is what, and we now will become a member of it. They must be more specific in terms of saying how it will benefit the public. Mr. Deputy, this bill also reminds us of different questions that the government has not yet answered. The IDB had guaranteed a $500 million loan. And there has been various explanations on how this $500 million was actually spent. The Prime Minister told Parliament that the people, told Parliament and the people, that the proceeds of the $500 million loan were not by covenant agreement to be used for debt refinancing, but for financing budgetary expenditures throughout the year. That's what he said. We were borrowing this money. It was not to be, the Prime Minister said to Parliament, that it was not to be used for debt refinancing or to pay off old loans. But that is it, that he also said that it is for financing budgetary expenditures throughout the year. These were his own words. But the government's own published public debt statistical bulletin report demonstrates that the government had to use a portion of the $500 million loan proceeds for rollover of debt and not just budget expenditure. Why is that? But if you look at the report, at page 13 of the report, out of that, the government said this fiscal year they took out $811 million in foreign currency loans. They took out $811 million in foreign currency loans and used most of that to pay off, to repay $662 in existing debt. Simple math would demonstrate that a substantial portion of the $500 million loan would have had to have been used to facilitate debt refinancing. And this was again recently, just a few days ago, raised by, in the Nassau Guardian, raised again additional questions after the government published their annual borrowing plan. Mr. Deputy, the simple truth is that it would have been illegal for the government to use the full $500 million for general budgetary expenses because, as the government so eloquently explained at page 5 of their published last year's annual borrowing plan for the previous year's fiscal year, the government only has parliamentary approval, or they only had parliamentary approval for new borrowing, which totaled 131 million. So Parliament only approved the government to borrow 131 million in terms of new borrowing. So it would have been illegal for you to borrow this $500 million for budgetary expenses because you did not get parliamentary approval to do so. So the primary purpose of that loan had to help refinance or roll over existing debt. If the government continues to insist, boy, I wish you would.
On his feet.
I wish you would say that.
On your feet.
Standing up.
On your feet.
You would clarify this quite easily. You would have clarified that point quite easily.
We yield to you.
But, Mr. Deputy, if the government continues to insist that the 500 million is all new borrowing and was not used to finance debt or refinance debt, then the government must provide evidence of the legal authority for them to do so and to explain what the $500 million was for. Mr. Deputy, it is amazing that the government has taken out $500 million, but there is no clear explanation as to where this $500 million went to and how this $500 million was spent. There is no clear view, no clear articulation,
My Lord.
as to how the $500 million was spent.
They can clarify
It is unfortunate. It is unfortunate that you have borrowed $500 million. You have borrowed $500 million, but you have not clearly said this is how that $500 million was spent.
We know how you spend your money.
Mr. Deputy, again, and this was a point.
We know how you spend your money.
This was a point again that was raised by the member for Marco City, which I again agree with and reinforce that you've also taken out, or you've also provided $100 million to BPL, which you call is a loan. And I see this also articulated at page 24 of your fiscal strategy report. But you didn't do it in the proper, ordinary way through subventions, because again, if you had given them $100 million additional in subventions, that would have screwed up your deficit. So you say it's a loan. You say it's a loan. But that notwithstanding, the proceeds for this loan were paid out of the consolidated fund. See, Mr. Deputy, the $100 million came from the consolidated fund. The Constitution says that anything that comes from the consolidated fund must be allocated through the budget and approved by Parliament. The two are connected. That in order for the money to come out of the consolidated fund, it has to be allocated in the budget, and then Parliament must approve the spending of the budget. Again, it all falls in line that if you're going to spend government monies, Parliament must approve you spending government funds. So you've taken it out of the consolidated fund, but you did not allocate it through the budget process. Which means if it was not allocated through the budget process, you did not get parliamentary approval to do so. So again, Mr. Deputy, that is why we say that the $100 million which you said you have spent and you have given to BPL is an illegal loan because Parliament did not approve it. Mr. Deputy, this also brings us again to a very important point again, that was raised by, what's my time? 4 more minutes. Oh, I got 2 more minutes? Okay. They told me I wasn't gonna make it. But, Mr. Deputy, in my final 2 minutes, this also again raises the question of the government's PPP, their initiatives in terms of the PPP. Again, it is a point that was raised by Marcos City. But and they say that this is their initiative. So if you've decided that you're going to have infrastructure development by focusing on these PPPs, we say you are breaching the government-established PPP written policy. Because one, that written policy requires you to go through a procurement process. It doesn't matter whether that person who you have agreed to or who you anticipate agreeing to comes to you with a proposal. The policy says even if they come to you with a proposal, you must still go through the process of a procurement process, a transparent, clear procurement process. And in addition, it also says that you must disclose the financial terms of that agreement. Mr. Deputy, this government has announced a number of different PPP arrangements. But to my knowledge, they have not made the financial arrangements of those PPPs public. And so if you did these same projects through CAF, you would have had to make these things public, because if the government did it, CAF would. Or if IDB, same process. If the government doesn't do it, then IDB will make it public. So, Mr. Deputy, again, we are calling upon the government to justify the paying of the $50 million subscription price, and to say to the public, this is what you will be getting as a result of you paying this $50 million. And we have yet to hear the specifics on what are the benefits, the specific benefits that the country will get. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. I didn't want to interfere with the member, but I would have said in my presentation with regards to resources from this agreement once we have ascended.
And I mentioned that the Ministry of Finance has identified that access to CAF resources can support the Bahamas' goals in the areas of climate change, infrastructure, the digital economy, crime, violence, and energy. I also said, Mr. Deputy, that I also wish to note that during the dialogue to discuss development issues with the government, an invitation to meet with CAF staff will also be extended to the members of the opposition and private sector establishments. Finally, Mr. Deputy, with the issue of pro-business, and the good member would have read a quote written in 2020. Well, I have an article here on the bfsbbahamas.com that was written September 9th, 2002. Some 18 years before this announcement, and right after 10 years of the F&M. And this is not to discredit anything the former Prime Minister Ingram would have done. He moved the country forward in many ways. But it's on the topic of pro-business approach to financial services and investment. And I speak of the Honorable Alison Maynard Gibson launching Financial Services Week in the Bahamas with a Tribune interview. Minister Maynard confirmed that she plans to unveil a 5-year plan for financial services sector by the end of the year. And it goes down to the penultimate paragraph. We want to send a clear message that this is a pro-business government, said Minister Maynard Gibson, who also referenced the need for the jurisdiction to maintain the right mindset and performance mode to compete with major offshore and international centers. The government has pledged to work hand in hand with the private sector to ensure an enhanced position of the Bahamas in the global financial services market. BFSB Chairman, Mr. Ian Fair, and CEO Executive Director Wendy Craig, all well-respected, Wendy Warren, also participated on Issues of the Day radio talk show on the first day of Financial Services Week. They echoed the sentiments of the minister in terms of a progressive approach to industry development with new products, legislation, and quality service orientation viewed as essential components to a dual goal of meeting market needs and maintaining the premier positioning of the Bahamas as an international financial center. Long before this was September 9th, 2002. This thing about the Bahamas being pro-business, or this came about in 2020. This was written 18 years before. No, you said what you quoted was written in 2020, and this is from 2000. Fair enough. I'm also saying that we could go and pull up, coming off the heels of 10 years of you being in government, we mentioning pro-business. So you were seen to be, but don't make it seem as this is a novel idea that just come up. That's all I wanted to do, member.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for East Grand Bahama.
Mr. Deputy, I appreciate the quote that the member for Pinewood says, and as I understand his quote, it was pre-2017, at the time when Alison Gibson was the Attorney General. But financial service, 2002, which goes even further back. But the point that I make was the previous F&M government, and it didn't start with that F&M government, but it was progressed with that F&M government. There were steps that were taken where we focused on the ease of doing business and where there was tangible results shown, not just from Bahamians, but tangible results shown from the World Bank, which said you did the most in the Caribbean. And that was the reason why I said that. Well, the question then is, if that is what the Free National Movement did between 2017 and 2021, what results, and that was the point that I was making, what results has this government done? How has this government made the ease of doing business better? Have they, what progress have they made? Have they built on what is happening, or when they came in, have they built on that? My assessment is, no, they have not. My assessment is they are not business friendly, and that's the point that I was making, Mr. Deputy.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Pinewood.
Good member referenced that. My only point was, I was referring to the specific point of this not being a business-friendly government. Mr. Deputy, let's put the emotions aside. Investors don't come into a country and invest billions of dollars if they don't feel that the government of the day is business-friendly. People just don't invest money because they like you. They invest money because they believe they're in a place where they will get a return. And my only point was, business-friendly did not start with the F&M. I just wanted to take him back 18 years where this topic was being discussed. I'm not just saying that the F&M was not business-friendly. I'm just wanting to point out to him that business-friendly or pro-business is not the monopoly of the Free National Movement.
Thank you, honorable member. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for St. Anne's.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Mr. Deputy Speaker, in 2002, there was an agreement establishing the Corporación Andina de Fomento institution. And when you look at the bill that's proposed here, on the 6th page at Section 1, it refers to the Bahamas shall subscribe 3,521 Series C shares corresponding to the ordinary capital of CAF, each share having a net worth value of $14,200 of the United States of America. The aggregate subscription price of the shares is $49,998,200 of the United States of America. Mr. Deputy Speaker goes on to say the rights, obligations, and characteristics of Series C shares are described in the agreement establishing CAF, the general regulations. I pulled up that agreement online, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and mention of Schedule C is found on the 11th page. And it reads that Series C, composed of 694,000 registered shares with a value of 5,000 United States dollars each, for a total amount of $3,470,000,000 United States dollars, the subscription of which corresponds to legal entities or individuals, persons outside of the member countries. So in 2022, the value of Series C shares was 5,000. Yet the minister moving the motion today has said that we're paying 4 times as much, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we're paying $14,200 per share. Yes, that is what he said. He said we're paying 4 times as much. I made a listing of some of the comments he made until the listing got to be too much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. So it's curious to understand why, in fact, as the mover, member for Pinewood, did say we're, in fact, having the Bahamas pay 4 times the value. Another interesting thing, Mr. Deputy Speaker, outside of what has been commented by Marco City and East Grand Bahama, is that this institution is based in Caracas, Venezuela, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which is a major producer of oil in the world, not just the region. If you can recall back to when the good member at the time, Leslie Miller, was member for one of the constituencies in Nassau, I think it was Tall Pines, Mr. Deputy Speaker, but he served as director of PEC. He had indicated that we might be getting fuel from Venezuela. The Prime Minister is traveling around the country, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on a wicket that the world needs to pay. These large carbon-emitting nations need to pay for the climate change and the impact that it's having on our region. Yet here we are now, Mr. Deputy Speaker, on the other hand, investing in entities that provide loans and have assets and have presences in these large carbon-emitting regions, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's a bit of a conflict, and, Mr. Deputy Speaker, it's a clear indication of where our priorities lie. It's also curious, Mr. Deputy Speaker, to note that recently in 2022, the CAF had rolled out something, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that I think was seen to be quite attractive to this administration, and that was that in 2022, it rolled out a program that would have over $300 million available for green climate change initiatives, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It said as part of the environmental initiatives in 2022, CAF funded the National Climate Change Policy Support Program in the order of $320 million. Panama will continue fostering the development of infrastructure for physical and functional integration, such as the hub logistics. But this is an entity in the region, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that has created a fund or has created an amount of money, $320 million, that it's going to set aside for its National Climate Change Policy Support Program. I don't want to hear, Mr. Deputy Speaker, after 3 years of flying around the world to COP27, COP26, even the Attorney General, after the FTX scandal, somehow appeared in Egypt like he needed to be there for climate change discussions. But I don't want to hear, after 3 years of flying around the world with massive delegations, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that we now have funding, and it's because of the great work and the relationships that have been built, when in fact, if we get it through this relationship that we're establishing with CAF, it's because we've given them $50 million, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's because we've given them $50 million, and the fact that we're doing it in 2 installments, and the fact that we're giving them $50 million, $25 million now, $25 million next year, Does that mean that we don't actually get proper control of our shares until the second installment has been made? You don't move into the house, you don't get to have occupation of a home until you made that final balance payment. So that could be 2 years down the road before we see anything, Mr. Deputy Speaker. No member from the government side has said a word about it today. And have we fully done our due diligence on CAF, Mr. Deputy Speaker, or are we excited about what we're going to get for our short-term problems that we're overlooking the long-term problems? If we haven't done our proper due diligence on CAF, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and we're looking to get funds from them out of their National Climate Change Policy Support Program, have they done due diligence on us, Mr. Deputy Speaker? You can look around in our country and see some of the climate change issues that we're simply sitting back on. We have a barge and a tugboat that are embedded in a reef in Abaco that still haven't been removed to this day. Mr. Deputy Speaker, as has been brought to my attention by my constituents, we also have an issue going on in Athol Island. In Athol Island, Mr. Deputy Speaker, which had previously been declared Athol Island Marine Protected Area, we have a major development project going on right now where clear cutting has occurred, native coppice has been removed, and piles and piles of barge, sand, and materials have been deposited on this island. I wish the member for South and Central Andros was here today, because he would be able to tell us, since this is seen as Crown land, who actually has the lease for this land. I'm told that it's approximately 4 acres of land, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Who has the lease for this massive parcel of Crown land that sits in a marine protected area? You have a plan at the bottom here, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's got Athol Island. That's the entire length of the island, which provides great protection to Nassau Harbor, the capital, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And you're going to find, Mr. Deputy Speaker, if somebody goes and carries out an inspection, that there has been demolition of the native limestone, essentially the native seawall, Mr. Deputy Speaker, clear cutting of a path going entirely across a great portion of the island. And who has it, and why do they have it? This is an offense. This is a marine protected area. This is a great travesty to our environment, Mr. Deputy Speaker. And at the same time, you have a prime minister going around the world telling everybody else that they're responsible and they need to pay, yet here we are in our own country causing damage each and every day under this Blueprint for Pain PLP administration. Yes, sir. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the time has come, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The time has come, Mr. Deputy Speaker, for this administration to take the job seriously or pack their bags and take them out of cabinet. The people of the Bahamas, Mr. Deputy Speaker, deserve the best that they can receive in this great Commonwealth. And again, Mr. Deputy Speaker, with this 4-acre demolition of a marine habitat in the Bahamas, I'm stating once again they've been proven not to be ready for the task and are actually doing more damage than they are doing good. With those comments, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the member for St. Anne's, as he always respects you, will now rest. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, we always like to take matters raised for concern seriously. The St. Anne's saw some work, terrestrial work, being done. We wondered, and although we will let the member for Golden Isles know, what is the allegation of abuse of the marine protected area as opposed to the terrestrial portions of the key?
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many? As many? The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Long Island.
Yeah.
You ready?
Yeah. Okay, so you're going to recess until after lunch? Okay.
The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Freetown.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, St. Anne's surprised us and went under 30. So he does show that it is possible. I stand to move, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that the business of the House be suspended this week.
Is there a seconder? It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House is suspended until 1 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. 3 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House stands suspended to 3 p.m.